Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in this video of UiPath data services series, we are going to see the next CRUD operation, that is retrieving of the data. So this video will be dedicated on how do we retrieve a data from a UiPath data service. That includes retrieving a single data and retrieving the complete set of data from the data services. In this video, to see the retrieval of data from the data services, what I have done is I have created a currency master data service entity. If I go to the data, we can see there is a lot of data that is related to currency and the actual rates and the reverse rate of the currencies. Okay, so if I go back to the entities, so this is the entity which we are going to see today, currency master. And if I go to the fields, so these are the fields: actual rate, currency, date, and the reverse date. Okay, and if I go to the data again, so data is like something like, for example, for the British pound, the actual rate was 0.752 and the reverse rate was 1.33 on this date. So let's try to retrieve this data from the UiPath Studio. We go back to the UiPath Studio. I take a new sequence. I call it retrieve data. Okay, now I go to manage entities. Now which entity we want to query? We want to query the currency master. So we go back to the UiPath Studio, and from the manage entities I just take the currency master. Okay, currency master is the entity, and this plus button indicates that I'm adding the entity. I hit on save. Now I go back to the project and I see the entity, simple entity, and the currency master is added in my project. Okay, now to retrieve the data, I can always go to the activities, data services, and in the entity record there is an activity called query entity. Okay, so one more way of querying the record is we can always go to the project, drag and drop this currency master here, and then UiPath will give all the available options. So we have to query entity records. I'll select that one. Okay, so when we drag and drop the entity, this entity is already selected, otherwise we would have to select it by browsing for the types. Now talking about the query is something on how do we want to get the data, on what condition we want to get the data. Let's go back to the data services. If I go to the currency master, go to the data, so this is all the data related to the currencies. Okay, so let's say I want to extract the euro rate. Okay, so the euro rate, so the euro actual rate is 0.843 and I want to extract this rate in my UiPath Studio. So how do we do that? So we can easily come back to the query entity record. In the query field, click on this button. It will give us a wizard that how we want to query. So as of now, we wanted where the currency equals euro, and if required I can add more conditions such as, and the, let's say I want to add a date where the date is more than some value. So as of now I'll just leave it to where currency equals euro, and other options are you can always add groups, you can add rows, and you can form a complete query string. Okay, so as of now what I am querying, I want to get the currency, I want to get the record where the currency is equal to euro. Hit OK and it will give me an output. So if I hit Ctrl K and create a variable called output record, let's go to the variable pane, and output record is a type of generic list of this type. Okay, so let's quickly debug this thing and see what we got. I will just put a right line here. Okay, and I'll just write done. Okay, let's try to run this flow in a debug mode and see what we get when we query the data. I go ahead and debug the file. Okay, so if I go to the output records, so output record is the variable, this variable, I click on the pencil icon and I can see there is a list of currency master which is having one item and which is the actual rate created by, and all of the details it has got me where the currency is euro. Okay, so I was able to fetch the record from the data service. Now let's see if I want to print the record. So how can we do that? I will just stop it, and we wanted to get the actual rate, right? And we wanted to get the actual rate. I will go back. So we want to get the 0.843, which was the actual rate. So I'll go to the properties, and here what I'll write, as we have seen there is only one record, so I can do is output record of 0, that means first item in the list, dot actual rate dot toString. Okay, so now what will happen is whenever I run this flow it will print. So I'll just print a message which says euro actual rate and plus. So what I'm doing here, I'm telling UiPath to go to the first item and print the actual rate. So we have seen there is only one item. So let's try to run this flow. I'll go here and run the file, execute it. Let's go to the output and you will see the euro actual raise was 0.843. So this is how we use the query entity records. So we have just seen how we can extract a single record. Now let's say I want the complete data, this complete data. How many records are this? Let's go back to the entity, and these are 53 records. So let's say I want to get all the 53 records in the UiPath Studio. So how I can do that? I can go to the edit query. I'll just remove everything and leave this query blank. And now what will happen is when this process will run in the output record, I'll get all the 53 records. So how can we verify that? I will go to the right line properties and I will just print the count. Okay, so we will just print the count of whose count, output records dot count dot toString. Okay, so again save the workflow. I'll put a debugger here. Let's try to debug the file. So currency master is having 53 records. Let's go to the locals. This is the variable, and so you can see the output variable is having a list of currency master, and 53 indicates that there are 53 records. So we can just verify that by printing the line items. I'll step into this line and I'll continue. Go back to the output panel and you will see the count is printed as 53. So this is how we retrieve the complete set of data from the UiPath data service with the help of query entity records. Now that we have seen how we can get the complete list of records from the UiPath data services, let's see one more activity which is provided by the data service. This activity is called get entity by record. So if I quickly drag and drop this activity here, so what this activity does is it will get me a single record. So now how it is different from this entity, we are also going to see. So let me just first select the entity. Entity is currency master and it asked me for the record ID. So we'll quickly go back to the data services. You will see that all of the data which is inserted in the currency master data service is having an ID, and this ID is unique to this record. So for example, for this British pound, this is the ID. So if I want to get this single record by ID, I can use the activity called get entity by ID. If I come back to the studio and pass this ID here, it says cannot convert it to system.get. So what we can do is we can go ahead and control K, set in variable, and let's see the type of the variable. So I'll just type the variable as record ID. Go back to the variables, and record ID is of the type GUID, and we were parsing a string variable. So what we have to do is we have to parse the string. So what I will do, at git dot parse, and then I'll pass the ID here. Okay, next thing for the output record, I'll just pass a variable called output single. Let's go back to the variable pane, and output single is a type of currency master. Now you will see the difference between the query entity record and the get entity record by ID. So the output record, the first one gives you a list of currency master, and get entity record by ID returns you a single record. So let's try to use that one. So now we have passed the ID. So if I go back, so the expectation is when I run the flow, I should be able to get this entire entity of British pound. Let's go back to the flow and I'll quickly disable this one. I have put a debugger here, and let's try to debug the file. Okay, we go to the locals. The variable is output single, this one. If I just open it, we'll see that we were successfully able to fetch the record for the British pound. I'll stop it. Let's say if I want to print any of the value, now since this is a single record, so I can directly type output single dot currency. Okay, and it is already of type string, so no need to convert. What I'll do is now I will run this file. Okay, execution is completed. Let's go back to the output, and you will see we have successfully fetched the British pound. So this is how we get the data from the data services. We can use the query entity records, or we can use the get entity record by ID. So that is all for this video. I'm wrapping up it here. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, and happy automation.